This is this spiral that I talked about once before that was discovered a few years ago by aerial photography, that if you put a spiral through the tips of the three pyramids, it comes around, forms the golden mean spiral, comes in here. And then there's another one that comes in here, which this guy didn't know about, and comes around and wraps around and forms another one here. The other one I talked about was the one with a little hole in the room that was next to it. This one, which is just a little, about a block away, has three, there's a controversy whether it's 3 or 4 pillars there. These people write that there was 3, but when I sent John Anthony West over there, he said there were 4. So I don't know, 3 or 4 pillars. But these pillars mark precisely the center of this place, and they mark this line. And they're out in the desert. And around all of that is a golden mean rectangle. So just the very placement of them has made this invisible golden mean rectangle on the desert floor only discernible from the air. Now this also forms a circle here, point Z. Oh. Well, just remember that point Z for a moment. I got one more slide. There is a ramp that goes off the Great Pyramid, and there's another ramp that comes off the Middle Pyramid that just misses the Sphinx, and there's another ramp that comes off here. They look like they're just at random and that there's nothing important about it, except that the ramp between these two here makes a perfect 30-degree angle, and this ramp points exactly to the phi ratio on the golden mean invisible spiral. And what is it? So this makes sense about this as being a phi ratio thing, but what is this 30 degrees about? There is also a circle that passes through the 3 Great Pyramids, this large circle that's like 2-3 miles around. And what they have discovered now is several things recently. For a long time, they thought that the Great Pyramid was aligned north and south to the magnetic field. You've read it probably in lots of books. But when they checked it very, very carefully, they noticed that it was off a tiny, tiny bit. And so there's been speculation that it was continental drift over this length of time or something like that, trying to figure out why there was this little tiny bit off. And but what the computers have now found is that they don't believe that there's anything off at all, because the eastern faces of all 3 pyramids and the eyeballs of the Sphinx are all looking at the precise, exact spot on the horizon. In other words, each one is slightly turned and everything else like that, so they all converge on this very specific spot, which is where, at a certain day, I guess it's on July 23rd, and I don't know exactly whether it was at the time the pyramids were, they assume they were built, or there's a certain factor here, I'm not sure, but they're aimed at the helical rising of Sirius, which makes sense anyway because all their calendars and everything were based on that, which is almost due east. It's off so little you can hardly tell the difference. Well, anyway, whether you use the helical rising of Sirius or east could make a difference if you're looking at this as a calendar, but in terms of what we're about to talk about, it won't make a whole lot of difference. Anyway, you put that circle around there, and the 2 ramps that make the 30-degree angles, if you broke that circle up into 30-degree slots, you come up with 12 places. And starting from here, you could put the 12 signs of the constellations around there. We know they knew this because the constellation sign was at Dendara, clearly. The exact pattern was all there. broken up into 30-degree angles. And if you do that, it places the Great Pyramids between Virgo and Leo, physically on such a structure. Even though it was made a long time ago, that's where they physically sit. And this is where we physically are right now. What these guys were thinking was that perhaps they were placed there in that way, and that if you drew bisecting lines and possibly the lines of all the edges and everything else over onto across here, it would throw an entire spectrum of dates between Pisces and Aquarius. It may be that we have some kind of calendar that's happening here. They're still unfolding it all. I don't know where it's come to at this level now, but there's a lot of people real interested in this now, because they didn't even know it existed until just a few years ago. And it's interesting that we just became aware of it now that we are between Virgo and Leo. We weren't even. You have to be in an airplane, before you can even discover that it's there. And the Sphinx, of course, like I said, is half virgin and half lion, the two symbols of this whole thing. So you can work with that if you want. And the location of the Sphinx, which is important, appears to be just out in the middle of sand, out in the middle of nowhere. It doesn't seem, if you were not initiated, you wouldn't know that there was any kind of logic to its placement whatsoever, except this invisible golden mean rectangle that's very precise around here. If you bisect it and put a line right down the middle, it passes exactly through the headdress of the Sphinx. And if you draw a line along the southern face of the this middle pyramid, it passes exactly along the right paw of the Sphinx. This is it. The edge of this and the edge of the Sphinx are in perfect alignment from the air. And the middle of the golden mean rectangle is exactly on this line, coming down, locating a spot right here on the right paw. This place has been marked from the air. Well, who's familiar with Edgar Cayce's predictions? What was the right paw? It was through the right paw that the opening would be found to the halls of records. The halls of records are all the proof of the ancient civilizations that have lived on this earth, going back 5.5 million years. Well, when we first went there in 1985, we were told that we had to do, we were working with the angels, and they made us go behind the Sphinx about a quarter mile, and there's this tunnel that leads to the Sphinx, and we were to put down this very special, certain kind of sound down this tunnel. It's a very interesting kind of sound. In fact, we have the only machine in the world that can make this kind of sound. It's sound being converted directly into light. Anyway, I'm not going to get into that too much, but we put this sound down this tunnel for a couple hours, and we said, okay, that was enough. When we did that, and I'm not going to say I'm responsible for what happened with the Sphinx, but anyway, the Sphinx was absolutely straight. But when we went back there a couple of years later, the Sphinx was off on its side. It was falling over on its side. And the Egyptian government is, and I mean a lot, it's not just a little bit, it's way over like that. And what's happening is it's crushing over on its right paw, and the right paw keeps breaking open. And they keep fixing it, patching it back up, and it just keeps leaning onto it and smashing open and breaking open. And the other thing that's happening is the head is falling off. And so told me a long time ago, eventually the head will fall off, which is a real important When that happens, that's a real important date in history. And there will be a golden sphere in its neck, which is like a time capsule. It's about so big around, which will, when it breaks off, half of it will be exposed, so that they'll see it immediately. But right now, they're doing everything they can to keep the head from falling off and the right shoulder from breaking open anymore. And eventually, and I believe that it's either already happened or it's still in the process, but I think at this point it's already occurred. There will be 3 people from the West that will enter into this doorway right here. And there is a physical door right there behind those stones. And go down a circular staircase to a room below, which they know the room is there. The Japanese have located it precisely. And over in the corner will be a clay pot, but the Japanese say there's also a coil of rope, and I don't know what that is. But the clay pot holds on it the information for those 3 people of how to proceed. And from there, they will have a very interesting experience that will lead them through a long tunnel, deep down, and they'll, I don't know if I want to describe all this, but all 48 chromosomes of Christ consciousness, which are geometrical images, will be etched into high up into this wall, one right after another, beginning with the flower of life. And soon after that, they will emerge into a room where the records are held, the physical records are held. I believe, I'm not certain, but I think that that's probably already occurred. Though time will have to tell on that one. I'm not going to go into the whole story of it with this group right now. I don't think it's appropriate. But this, what I'm about to talk about, is more important for this group. The shape of the room, by the way, the halls of records looks like this. These areas, this would be the floor pattern, and these raised areas and around there will be where the objects will be found. There are 3 schools in Egypt. One is the left eye of Horus, one is the right eye of Horus, and one is the middle eye of Horus. The left eye is the feminine path, the right eye is the masculine path, the middle eye is the child path. The left eye, which we're going to talk about right now, we've been talking about the right eye, basically, but we're now going to just lightly discuss the left eye. The middle eye you can't really talk about. It's just life. That's all it is. It's just life. It's applying the left and the right eye. Here again, you'll see these 2 eyes. This is a better one here. These are the 3 schools. This, by the way, for some of you who are familiar with Zecharia Sitchin's work, the sphere with the 2 snakes and the wings is the symbol for the planet Marduk, the 12th planet, the planet which the Nephilim and the Anunnaki come from. And this is the symbol for Metamorphosis. This is the symbol of the ibis bird, and the sphere, the oval, is the symbol for Chikutet, or Thoth, and it's also another symbol for the right eye, the male training. And this one over here, the bee with the plant stalk, if you can see that there, is another symbol for the left eye of Horus, or the feminine path. These are names, and this is the star Sirius and eternal life on either side of them. Either path leads to eternal life through the star Sirius. You have to pass through that star from their particular way of thinking of things.
Where was that from?
This is the Cairo Museum.
Where was that?
It's a capstone off of one of the pyramids. Not one of the Great Pyramids, just a pyramid. I really don't know which one. Just one of the pyramids. There's a lot of pyramids. in there. In the belief of the Ankh, you see the Ankh down here? The belief of the Ankh, in the Ankh is that the Ankh is the key to eternal life. It's one of the primary major pieces to the whole thing. And there, according to Thoth, the Ankh can only be received from behind. I'll explain what that means in a little bit, but you can see here where the Ankh is from behind. He's also holding the three tools of resurrection. This is Osiris, and this is Isis. These are the actual tools, and these are King Tut's tools. These are the real ones, of the frail and the hook. Anyway. And this is one of the rare photographs of this holy family actually using these tools. It was a tantric practice. Obviously, there's sexual energy involved here. And this is Isis and Horus and Osiris. You see they're holding the Ankh. Horus is holding the rod to the back of his father's head, to the chakra point back here, which has the 45 degree on it. They must have the tuning fork pretty well already figured out for him, because they're not using the frail to tune it with. And look what he's doing with the hook rather. And look what he's doing with the frail. He's holding the frail with a single finger up like this, so that you can tune the vibration precisely down the spine. So you can get down there. And then as the sexual energy rises, it moves up around in the form of an Ankh in a certain way, which leads to eternal life from their point of view. I'll talk about this exactly a little bit more, what was really going on there. Here you see Isis. This is another person here, where Isis is giving the understanding of eternal life to him through the breath. Same thing here. And she's gently holding his hand, and she has not just the sphere over him, but a red oval, which is the egg of metamorphosis, communicating to him that through the breath he will he will change physical form to a different form. This is all the temples that run up the Nile correlate with the chakra points in the human body. This is the second temple, and it's called Kom Ombo, and it's the sexual chakra. It is the only temple that is dedicated to polarity, to the male and the female, and it is the only temple in Egypt that is dedicated to two gods at once. And there is a line down the middle of this temple, and one side is one god and one side is the other, the principle of polarity. And it's real interesting when Greg Braden was over there with his group just recently. Remember that big earthquake they had just recently? When was that? That was November or something like that? Last December? Real recently. He said that when they that you could tell it, and the guards told him the same thing. One side is dark and one side is light, and the side that was dark was almost completely destroyed, and the side that was light, not one thing moved. Sign of the times. Here you see the two left eyes of Horus and the little 45-degree rod for resurrection over here. This temple is dedicated to. Now what I'm about to talk about, this is the left eye of Horus, and in each one of these temples, they dealt with various aspects of your feminine side, whether you're male or female, it doesn't matter. It's your right brain, okay? And so they dealt with things like psychic energy, and your fears, and and sensitivities, and all these kinds of things, and feelings, and emotions. These were the kinds of things that they worked with the people as you went through there, and that was what your beginning training was. But one of them was this thing with fear, and you can begin to understand why with what I just talked about. They knew that they were going to go into fourth-dimensional spaces. And if you go into those fourth-dimensional spaces with fears, you're going to have to deal with them because they will become real. And so they went through a tremendous amount of work to get rid of these fears out of people. And every temple, which was each chakra, relates to a different thing. You're talking about, the first one is survival and then sexual and power things and heart chakras and throat and sound currents and all the various things going up to different levels. And each one has a different kind of fear associated with it and a different kind of emotion associated with it that they focus in on. And I'm just going to talk about one of the fears that they dealt with in this temple here. And I went there the second time. I took Katrina over there the first time. The second time, Katrina took me over there, which was kind of reciprocal. And so I went with her group the second time that she gave. And she was given a ceremony where we went down in this little hole in the ground here. And here's the floor, and then it goes like this. So that hole that he's going in is like this one here. And you go in there, and then there's a big granite slab hanging down. So that you have to come in, and if you just go real fast, you just run into a wall, kind of, and you got to go underneath it and then come back up and come out the other side. And they talked about how this was filled with water. And we all went in and did this ceremony, and I was thinking, boy, this ceremony seems awful simple. And so after they were all done, it was real beautiful what we did, but when we were all done, I had the advantage then of having Thoth with me, and I said, okay, what really went on here? And he began to describe to me, he says, look around. He said, be observant. You see this right here? What that is those were, they put metal in here so that when they put two blocks together, it would keep them from moving. You see there's another one over there, right by the foot, over here. They ran all along there and all along. This was a wall, and this was a wall. He told me to climb up on the other side of there, and I did, and I climbed up over here, and I got up high over here. Now that hole was right down in here. You see this person standing down there. And in the hole, or that hole was right in the middle here between these two things. So this was a wall. You could see these pegs. The wall went all the way up to here, maybe even higher, all the way up to here. And there's another wall over here. And this was the center line between the two temples. This side was the temple of darkness. This side was the temple of light. And right in the middle was this one. So I asked him what happened, and this is what he said. I remember the first time I ever gave this, that he told me to give this, I gave it to one, and I had a lady go in shock. She couldn't even talk for about an hour. She was just there sitting on the wall quivering, so because she had done it and failed this test, and she remembered it in detail. And I hope there's nobody here that. Let me know if you start quivering. You see those little steps up over there? Those are the steps. And then it came down like this. And there was a slab that came down. And there was another one down here. And then there was another wall that came higher than this one with another slab like this. Like that. This is part of it now. This one came over like this. And this was the thing that we just went in over here. And Yeah, that's not too good. I think I'm just going to draw it. This is where I was, over here. And okay. So you had these two walls sandwiched together, and the whole thing was filled with water. So you had water here. These are little steps facing that way, and then water over here. So this whole thing would fill up with water, like this. And in here was alligators. This temple was dedicated to alligators and crocodiles. And the little innocent initiate would come over here and be looking at a blank wall with these three little steps and this little square of water. That's all they could see, nothing else. Just this little square of water. And they were told to go in and don't come back out this way. And to be careful. So with one breath, and they had to do a lot of training before they did this. I mean, they didn't just throw them in there. They did a lot of training on breathing and everything else like that. They would come in here, and they couldn't go real fast because they'd hit their heads on here. They had to move slowly around these things. And they come down here, and this is lit up. Light's coming in here. And they come in here, and right when they get down here, they look up, and there's all these alligators, which probably caused the little innocent person to experience a certain amount of fear. And the alligators were actually fed, according to Thoth, and they didn't eat anybody. But it wouldn't matter. It just simply wouldn't make any difference once you were down here. You know you can't go back, and so what happens is you got to weave your way around through these alligators and come up to this step and get out. That's what happens almost always the first time. And then when you get out, you get up here, you were told that you just failed. And you have to do it again. It's not the way out. And so now the person has to go through a whole bunch more training, comes back a second time, though they could do it on the first time, but almost never, he said. They come back the second time, and now they know the alligators are in there. And they also know that that's not the way out. So they have to come back down here a second time, and when they get here, at the moment of their greatest fear, they have to go deeper into this place here. Find it and go deeper into it and come out over here onto this other side of the wall. At which point they go on to the next one. And they had devised all these systems of things to get you. And he says hardly anyone ever died, but occasionally they did. But that's life. From an Egyptian point of view, you got to push things sometimes. So anyway, they had another one over here, which I wanted them to ask me. There was a big, huge hole that was maybe 30 feet around with stairs that spiraled down into the water, and you could just see them disappearing. down, 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 down. I figured there's probably some kind of weird thing with that too. But he wouldn't tell me what it was, so I don't know what it was. So these are the kinds of things that many of you people have worked with before in your past. This is out of Memphis. It's a new temple they just discovered when I was there. This is the ground level up here, and this was only about 4 or 5 feet under the ground, and this is the top of about a 40 or 50-foot pillar. So it's a huge temple that's totally buried. And this is Hathor. Only Hathor is not a single person. It is a race of beings, according to Thoth and to the ancient writings. And Hathor, there's a Hathor race, and they live on Venus in the 4th dimension. And they are the most advanced souls in this solar system. And they are very much like the dolphins. They're tall. They're 10 to 16 feet tall. The females are about 10 to 12 feet, and the males are about 14 to 16 feet tall. And they function almost totally with sound. The sounds that they can make with their voice can do just about anything. And the dolphins are real similar. They function almost totally on sound also. And they're on real similar levels of consciousness, though they have very different physical forms. And they're just pure love. They just love people. They love everything. They don't have a mean bone in their body. And I did witness one of the people I was with had an initiation with the Hathor, where they had to learn what the sound of the Ankh was. And it's a continuous sound that you do for about 2 hours. One continuous sound where you never stop. And you know, like the Aboriginals do the didgeridoo, and they learn how to make a sound that never stops. You can do the same thing, but there's a sound you can make that they teach you that once you get the sound going, the sound just never stops. You learn how to breathe in through your nostrils and out through your mouth, and some of the air goes into your lungs. So you never have to ever breathe. It's just one continuous in-breath and out-breath at the same time. And if you don't think that's possible, then talk to an Aboriginal. They do it all the time. I had someone who you can train. The training is a simple way of training is you put a straw into water, you start blowing bubbles, and you learn how to blow bubbles continuously without ever stopping. Anyway, the Hathors, I'll talk about the Hathors later. They're pretty good people. And this is the temple that was dedicated to Hathor. It's the oh, it just slipped my mind. Dendara. Yeah, right, thank you. It's Dendara. That's Katrina Raphael. I don't know who that is. And somebody came in there and destroyed all the faces of the Hathors, all these pillars that go all, and so there's inside are these huge, huge, huge pillars with Hathors all around them. They destroyed all of them.
Do you know why?
I don't know. The Christians that came in saw all of this as evil, and tried to destroy a great deal of it. This was pagan to them, and like I said, a lot of it was. It was a cult. It was not certain aspects of this, because of the mistaken idea that each one of these Nephers were gods. That was where the problem was. If it had not been for that, it would. Both the Christians and the Egyptians probably would have been very agreeable in all kinds of ways, but it didn't work out that way. Anyway, inside, this is the temple that has the up on that side over there and way back. And this thing is so big you can't imagine. It's like half a mile around in all directions, with a huge wall around it and all that. This is just the central part, and it's enormous. And up over in here is where the wheel, the astrological wheel, is on there. But over on this side, here's where I want to talk about. You can't see this picture very well. This is a doorway. It's dark as it goes into a dark area. And over here is the symbol for Marduk, the 12th planet. And down here is a circle with the left eye of Horus in it, and this is Thoth pointing to it. And inside of there is the story of Isis and Osiris. And what many people don't realize is that Horus was a virgin birth, like Jesus. And in fact, almost all of the people, like Krishna, etc., were all immaculate conceptions and virgin births. Whether or not they're virgin doesn't really matter, but anyway, we'll talk about that now. So what I'm going to discuss right now is Immaculate Conception, which we tend to think is myth in 1992. We think that that's just not true. That we could accept, if we're Christian, that what?
93.
Are we still in that year? I want to go back the other way. 93. Okay, 1993. Yeah, I still haven't quite got here yet, I don't think. We still think that it's myth, that it isn't true. We think, if we're Christian, we can see that that there's an Immaculate Conception that produced Jesus, and we can accept that. But we don't think that it could possibly ever have anything to do with us, or that anyone else has ever done it. Most Christians only think that Jesus was the only one, though there are many, 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 many examples of this. In fact, the AMA has over 200 examples of it in documented, absolutely documented, no doubt, Immaculate Conception births on record. But let me even go much deeper than that. In here, I want to talk about the story of Isis and Osiris. I think I did describe, right? The whole thing, he's cut in 14 pieces and brought back the whole thing. And that she flew to him, and it shows this hawk. She turns from a human into a hawk and flies to him and wraps the wings around the penis. And then immediately after that becomes pregnant with this baby, which becomes this hawk-headed baby, which is Horus. And through the birth of Horus, the three of them become immortal beings, very much like what happened with Ayantaya, Lemurian. Well, one minute, let me just make an introduction to this. Again, we don't believe, most people don't believe that an Immaculate Conception can take place. But let's look at the evidence. First of all, Immaculate Conception takes place all around you, every day, all the time, all over the place, in nature. All over. There's all kinds of plants and trees and insects that do it all the time. Lots and lots. I don't know how many. It's probably in the hundreds of thousands of them that are capable of doing this. Now just pick one so you can see clearly the image of what I'm saying. And that one is the bee that we're so familiar with. The bee, a female bee, can make a male bee anytime she wants. She does not need to mate with a male bee if she wants to make a male bee. She can just say, I think I'll make a male bee today. And make a male bee. But if she wants to make a female bee, she has to physically mate with the male to make the female bee. That's the arrangement they've made. Well, let's look at this. Let's look at the family tree of a male bee. A male bee only needs a mommy. Now this is fact. This is not, I'm not making this up, this is fact. The male bee only needs a mommy, but the mommy needs a daddy and a mommy. But the mommy needs a mommy and a daddy, but the daddy only needs a mommy, but the mommy needs and it comes down in this funny-looking tree, right? Okay. Well, when you come over here, there's 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, and you see the Fibonacci sequence unfolding. But if you had the family tree of an animal or anything else that is not using Immaculate Conception, it comes down 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, and it's the binary sequence. The two primary sequences of life. One is male and one is female. Peter C. Hopp, Carl Ilminster announced in 1977 the successful birth at the Jackson Laboratory in Bar Harbor, Maine, of 7 single-parent mice. The process was called parthenogenesis, or virgin birth. However, Immaculate Conception would be a more accurate term since the female does not have to be a virgin. 2 people took animals and took a female and got the female pregnant without any interaction from the male whatsoever. Zip. And made virgin birth mice. That was the first time it took place. Only in 1977, recently. All they had to do was to take the ovum and to stick a little pin through it, and mitosis began. No sperm at all. Nothing. And now, since then, they've done it with all kinds of things. Rabbits, but and everything like that. And humans. They've done it with human beings. There are virgin birth humans that have been done in the laboratory. I've even talked to the doctor who's done it, which was in North Carolina, one of them. Though we don't hear about this stuff too much. We don't know that this kind of experimentation is going on. And in the old journals of before 1900, in medical journals, they claimed that some females had a particular gland that could excrete an acid, and that acid would begin the process. And I asked him about this, and he had never read the journals, but he said that from everything he knew about this, there probably was no reason why an acid couldn't work as anything that broke the surface. So it could either eat through the surface or break the surface of the ovum, and the birth process begins. However, when a human baby is born from Immaculate Conception, or parthenogenesis is what it's called, it is a female, always, so far. And the female looks identical to the mom, because that's where she drew all the genes from. All of them came from her. And as far as they know, the female is sterile. As far as they know. Is she really sterile? Or is she now only able to mate interdimensionally? She can mate physically all she wants. If she's an interdimensional being now, she won't be able to mate that way. She'd have to mate interdimensionally. There's so much that is not learned about this. The other thing that they're discovering is that the length of time of birth, instead of being 9 months, is about 10.5 months. And my wife believes that she had an Immaculate Conception. Before I met her, she had not been with anyone. We didn't have any reason for her to not say this. It didn't matter. She had had children before and been married and everything. But she said that with the last baby, She hadn't been with anybody. And when she got pregnant, she didn't believe the doctor, and she went to another doctor, and the doctor said, yeah, you're pregnant. She didn't believe that one, went to another one. And I went to 3 doctors, and they all told her she was pregnant. They thought she was crazy. And it took 10.5 months for the baby to be born. And when the baby came out, and even now, it is like a mirror image of her. I saw the picture of her when she was 2 years old, and I had the baby there when it was 2 years old. I remember sitting in front of this picture of the baby and the image of my wife when she was 2 years old, and I couldn't even see not even the slightest difference at all, not a thing. I sat there for a long time looking at it. It's like nothing. And there's a lot of women today in 1993 who are, at least in 1992 there were anyway, that are having 10.5-month pregnancies, according to this doctor in there, because we discussed this whole thing. There may be something going on in this right now. We don't know. I mean, I'm not saying any of this is true. All I'm just saying is this is what is known so far, and you can make up your own mind about all of this. I remember at one point when it was Thoth who wanted me to put this out and study it, and I remember at one point Thoth, while I was studying some of the geometry, I was sitting there and I was trying to figure something out, and he's just sort of sitting here watching me, and I was trying to figure something, and he was just sort of making conversation. He said, or there isn't really any time when he just makes conversation, but he said, would you like to hear a story about my mom? And I said, yeah, sure. And I'm sitting here trying to figure this thing out. And he said, well, this is actually right before, because at the time I didn't know why he was trying to tell me this. He said, his mom's name was Chikutet. Chikutet is a title. It's kind of like Rinpoche, which means the precious one. Chikutet means the seeker of wisdom. And Chikutet means the holder of wisdom. And he said his mom, right after the race was created, she was one of the first ones that became where they could have children. And while all the other ones were mating physically and having babies in the binary sequence, she elected to go in another way. And she found this man that she fell in love with, but they made love interdimensionally, without physical contact, from 2 different places. There's still orgasm. There's still a lot of things that go on, but it's a different kind of connection that's made. And she became pregnant. And in having this baby, the same thing that happened with Tai and Aye, they became aware of their nature and their relationship to God, and they became immortal beings. And only when her husband, no, put it another way, the baby was a boy, not a girl, like we would get through parthenogenesis in this one. It came out a boy. And when the little boy grew up and became an adult, then the father knew what he was to do, and he left his body. He let go of it and migrated to Venus and became part of the Hathor race. Took on a Hathor body and changed evolutionary patterns. This is a story. You can take it as a myth or whatever you want to take it as. And then the mommy mated interdimensionally with the son and had another baby boy. And then when that baby grew up, then the son dropped the body and went to Venus and became part of the race. And the father then left Venus and went on through the sun, right into the sun to Sirius, and became part of that race. And then this process continued on. And then when they would keep mating, having another son, that son would go to Venus, next one would go to Sirius, next one would go to Pleiades, was the next level out. And they kept going out, and from Pleiades it was until Aldebaran. And the original father kept stretching further and further and further out in consciousness, while the mother stayed anchored to Earth, all the way up until the time of Atlantis, where Thoth's father's name was Thome. And Thome and his mother had an interdimensional baby, which was Thoth. And when Thoth grew up, then Thome left his body and went to Venus. And then Thoth and his mother interdimensionally mated and had a baby whose name was Tot. Now, according to the Egyptian records, Tot was born of Shizat, his wife. He broke the lineage. He got married. Thoth married a woman, and for the first time, and who was Shizat, and they assumed that the baby that was born was from them, called Tot. But according to Thoth, it's not true. It was from the mother, and then later, when Thoth went to Peru, along with Shizat, they had a baby together down there, a girl, born of physical contact, and began a binary sequence pattern as well as the Fibonacci sequence pattern from the same lineage. And I just listened to all that stuff, and I didn't know what to think about it. I still don't really know what to think about it. Perhaps there's more in this universe than I know. I don't know. Though I think that there is, if you do study the world's religions, right back to the core of who they are, you'll keep coming up with the same thing over and over again. A brother, it's usually a brother and a sister mating to form a child who becomes the leader of this religion. So in his case, it was a mother and a son. And so I don't know what this is all about. And you can just look at it and think about it. But it's real. It's really real now. It's really possible. It's not that it isn't possible. It's absolutely scientifically proven beyond any doubt. It's real.
But we haven't been able to scientifically find a male from the Immaculate Conception.
No. But I think the reason is because she's not really interdimensionally mating. It's a mechanical device to get the process going. Whereas in real life, it's a real male and a real female interdimensionally mating. And that creates a male. That creates a male. Another thing that's just happening right now, today, right this very minute, 1993, is that they have just discovered that a big law has just been broken. They've just discovered that the number of chromosomes, we've always thought that 23 chromosomes came from the female, 23 chromosomes came from the male, right? Isn't that what you're all taught?
Yep.
It's wrong. Absolutely wrong. They've proven it beyond any doubt whatsoever now. It just isn't true. Any number whatsoever can come from the female, all the way from 23 to all 46. And in fact, usually more come from the female than from the male. And he contributes a certain amount, and she fills in the rest. And this is what they've now discovered. This isn't like in the last 2 months. We now know this. Yeah.
Just one more question.
Yeah.
Can the male do more than 23?
What they believe now is that it's the other way around. The male, I don't know if the male can do more than 23, but they do know that the female can contribute any amount from 23 to all of them to create the baby. And they're mapping the chromosomes. They're mapping the genes now. I don't know if you're following all this. There's 100,000 genes in the human body. They know what about 3,000 of them are, and within a few more years, they're going to know what all 100,000 of them are. They're going to know the blueprint. They'll be able to, and with all they know about this kind of stuff and everything else like that, they would be able to make a brand new race of any kind of conceivable thing you can want. All kinds of diseases that have never been able to be solved will be able to solve really easily, very soon. Lots and lots of stuff. They'll know if you've got the diseases even from the day you're born, and be able to correct them. We're heading in a real interesting level. We're going to be there real soon. And the United States, by the way, is trying to patent them. And you know about this? They're trying to patent all the genes. And so that they can control all of this. Yeah. Spending lots and lots of money doing it. But the French did it. Yay for the French. The French have figured out a way to, the United States has spent billions, I don't know what it is, to do this. And this one man in France, using a very low budget, has figured out a very rapid way to determine what the genes are, and is mapping the whole thing really quickly. And he's going to beat the United States, almost for certain, and he's going to give it to the United Nations as a gift, which will mean that they can't be patented at that point. So, thank God. Thank God for the French. Okay, there's an image inside of this system that if you took just this out of the genesis out of the middle of the flower of life, you saw where it came from. And now take the circle that encloses the genesis pattern and this circle right here. Take that image out of there. This is the image I'm referring to. Okay, everybody sees that? Now, once you got that image, which you now know that image comes out of the flower of life, put that same image in each one of those two empty circles. The whole image, put it in there and there, like this. Okay? And then do it again, and just keep doing it. Keep putting the image in here, and keep repeating it, repeating it, repeating it. And if you do that, you end up with this image that looks like this. Remember when we talked about the egg or the ovum and how mitosis begins, and at first it goes within itself and learns how things works, and then it turns around and grows beyond itself. It first goes within and then without. Well, you can see this geometrically in this way. First of all, this is a binary pattern. This is 1, 2 circles, 4 circles, 8 circles, 16, 32. It's a binary sequence. And it happens to be the pattern if you took a string and stretched it, and depending on where you fret it, and the thickness of the string when you strike it, it's going to resonate like in one of those patterns running down here. I used to have a little machine that you could turn on, and you can sit there and watch this string move through all those various patterns. Well, the very nature of this going within itself, by going geometrically inside of itself, you could see how something works, like a sine wave curve, before you go beyond it into something bigger. You understand what I meant by that? If life can geometrically go within itself to understand how, say, it would be hard to, from, say, this point here, understand a sine wave curve because it's too short. But as you go deeper inside and deeper inside, you can get to the place where you can see the whole picture and you can understand how, I'm just saying for example, how a sine wave curve could work. And then apply it to go beyond the perimeter of the interior to the exterior. Now, with that understanding, we're going to look at the flower of life again in a slightly different way. Just starting with a circle, there is a relationship inside this circle that is definite, and that is that no matter what size circle you have, there are exactly 7 circles that will fit inside of it. And that's how they fit inside of it, which is the primary pattern that at the point, or at the point that the flower of life was stopped at all around the world, which we haven't shown you that yet. But the way that we arrived at the fruit of life, remember, which was just this pattern with one more, the 13, was by completing the flower of life and then taking the next vortex ring around it, so that we saw the flower of life was, or the fruit of life was outside of this. It was on the next level, directly outside of here. But there's another way that it can be derived at, and that is by going within rather than without. And so you can derive it within directly by going halfway to the center and making a circle that would be half that size, using that as your blueprint and running it up and down these 3 axes to get this, which is directly to the fruit of life. And so the fruit of life is contained within the flower in proportion as well as outside of the flower of life. And this may seem like a very simple or almost a sleight of hand trick, but it indicates that possibly the flower of life is holographic. And so if we keep doing this, we'll see if it's really true. You know what I mean by holographic? Okay, so we would go another half, we go halfway. By holographic, I mean, I heard a no. You all know what holograms are. A hologram is such that the nature of it is that you can cut off a little tiny piece of it and reconstruct the whole from that little tiny piece. The actual image is contained, and no matter how small you get, it'll be contained in the whole. In the same kind of way, we'll see if this pattern of 13 circles is holographic, is what we're looking for. And so we'll go in another halfway and draw that size circle and spread them out and see what happens. And they take on this image, which you can see that there's 13 circles connected to 13 circles connected to 13. All these little interconnected fruit of lives. So it's beginning to look like it, so let's go one more step in deeper, and you go halfway in here again and make another one. And now you see the same pattern, 13 circles connected to 13, though I didn't spread it over the whole thing. You can keep right on going with this pattern. Each one will be a whole series. It'll completely cover this. And it really is holographic. You could just keep going and doing that forever and ever and ever. The pattern will just completely go in forever, and it'll go out forever, because the circle that forms this whole pattern could just simply be the central circle. And so it could just go beyond itself forever and inside itself forever. It's another one of those infinite, it's called a geometrical progression. It's another one of those infinite patterns like the logarithmic spiral. And all the grids, if you want to call these like patterns or grids, are separated from each other by the binary sequence. In other words, if you use the middle circle, whatever it is, as your radii, count that as 1, then to get out to the next size circle is 2, and to get out to the next size circle is 4, and to get out to the next size circle is 8. And it's a binary sequence that separates them all. This, so this internal structure, or this internal nature of the flower of life, holds tremendous potential in terms of technology. And I'm saying this because at the time, that's what I was involved in. And I'm now going to start talking about some of the this technological thing that we were starting to discuss once before. And I'll tell you what we were thinking. Why I started doing this in my life in the first place was because it was my belief, and a lot of the other people that I was working with at the time, that the dolphin was perhaps the life form that may be able to help humans more than anyone else on the earth. And so we wanted to communicate with them. We were very naive in a lot of our assumptions in the beginning, but our intentions were pure. We just wanted to do it. And so we decided, well, let's make a universal translator. A translator that you could speak into in one language and it'll come out any other language. Understand? Just like on Star Trek, you know, those things. Let's just make one. You could make any of that stuff that's on Star Trek if you just put your mind to it. And so we thought about it and we figured out how to do it. And only we realized that the sound of the dolphin, after a great deal of thinking, we wanted to go into a deeper level of communication than just the words. You know, either connecting directly with the thought waves. That was the next level, which would be much better than the words. Get the images straight out of the mind. But then we decided to even go deeper than that, and to go down to the molecular construction of the body itself, and receive the microwaves that were coming off of every molecule in the body, which is, we felt would be a far greater form of communication than words or brain waves or anything else. And so we decided to develop this system. And the system looks something like this. These are the components in the system. So we'll call this A, B, C, and D. There are four primarily components to make this type of system. An ordinary computer. And that was the basis behind it. However, the computer needed to be a lot faster and have a lot more memory because of the kinds of computations that would be necessary to make. So then that was available at that time. The best we had was a 386. And so they tore the 386 all apart and put it back together and made it so it could go a whole lot faster. But it still had the problem of not being able to simply store the kind of information that we needed to store. And so what we felt we needed was a storage bank that would be a lot bigger than anything that was on the market. And so we decided to make an infinite storage bank, have no limit whatsoever. It's real easy to do. And based upon these principles. And so I guess I'll talk about that first. Using this concept right here of the geometry, really this is a cube, right? So it's really a series of three-dimensional spheres. Does everybody see that? You know, it's really it's like Metatron's cube. This is the front face of the cube, and that would be the rear edges of it. It's a cube looking at it like that again. Okay. And so when you completed the whole thing, now you can keep going on with those spheres, going in there forever. Well, because of the harmonics of the nature of the ratios of these spheres, we conceived that it would be possible to put this pattern into a liquid in the form of a standing waveform. And so we attempted to do this using liquid silicon, using a series of diodes, not diodes, transducers. transducers placed into a fruit of life pattern. And we were able to create the pattern into it, but it took a huge amount of energy to hold the standing waveform in there. And then one of the researchers had direct communication with a whale who gave us exactly what we needed to know and said, don't use silicon. The Army had been trying to use liquid ruby and all kinds of other things. They've been trying to do exactly what we were doing here, only spending hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars probably trying to do this. And we had a very little budget. But the whale told us to do something we would have never thought of doing, I don't think. It was just like totally out there in right field. They said, don't use any of your liquid crystals or anything. Use water. And water. And the reason for water, they said, was the angle of the molecules is 105 degrees, which is the phi ratio. And it's a living molecule. And that this is a living pattern and that the two are so compatible that it would take small amounts of energy to do it. And we did it, and it works. You can put it in there. Instead of having huge amounts of energy, it takes microvolts to hold the standing wave pattern. And so we were able to create the pattern in the water. So all you got to do is just take a cube and have any size you want, but might as well pick one that's kind of handy. So you pick one, say, 3/4 of an inch or so on the side. You just have to calibrate that to the computer so it knows where to start from, and seal it with water, and then create the pattern inside of it. And then realize the pattern is all the different grids are on a binary sequence, and so it's a little different than you'd have like a phonograph record where you punch a binary sequence and it comes up somewhere in the record to give you your information. The difference is that you would hit a binary sequence which would tell you what grid you're on, and then a geometrical sequence which would tell you which sphere to go to. So you go click, click, and it would come up to, say, that one right there. And once you have located that particular magnetic bubble, you could put one bit of information in that, or create another grid coming off of it as big as you want. So you could put either one single letter of an alphabet or an entire book or whatever you want in that one place. It wouldn't matter. And because this will go in forever, you could just keep going on in. However, the size of the electron would probably limit how far in you could go. But you could go out forever. So you could start storing information you'd never be able to use probably in most circumstances, just what you could do going in this thing. But if you ever did fill it up, you could start going out and start storing information in space around the computer. And you could go out in space as far as you want to go. And because it only has to be theoretically there, it doesn't have to actually be there. It only has to theoretically be there. And so we figured, well, what the heck, that should work. We almost had that completed. That was almost totally completed. In the meantime, we were working on this one here, which was completely completed. And this particular scientist, who doesn't want his name mentioned anymore, created a sensing device that was very possibly the most sensitive sensing device that's ever been created on our planet ever, and based upon sacred geometry principles that could so sensitive that you could pick up the entire electromagnetic spectrum of a candle from 90,000 miles away, as though it was an inch away. You could pick out a single molecule, say 100 miles away in a tree. One. You could pick out a single person and eliminate everything behind it for hundreds of thousands of miles and eliminate down to a single molecule in that person. And we were demonstrating it all the time. It's totally possible. Seems impossible, but it's not. And it was because of some of the things that you're about to learn in here about light and the geometry behind light and Anyway, this whole thing was created. This thing was so sensitive that and what it was picking up, by the way, was the microwaves that are emitted from the stretching of molecular bonds and the rotation of molecular bonds, and possibly from the rotation of the electrons themselves. It's an extremely weak microwave field that our government is now also has copied him and is trying to create it there. And with all the money they've spent, they haven't even come close to him, but they're getting there. It's called a squid, if you're familiar with what that is. But who knows how much? He's way, way, way beyond the government on this. And you could take, and he's demonstrated this in class, you can take some pennies. Just by the shaking of pennies, you get microwave emissions that come off of there, just from because they hit together and make the molecular bonds vibrate. And he'd have the instrument. Now the instrument was first the thing was calculated, then he hooked it to a 386, and then created his own software program so that he could have eyes to see through the sensing device back over to here. And we actually created other ones earlier, and then which were inferior to this, but this was at this point we have these two linked together here, and so you could see what was going on in terms of sine wave signatures. Originally, it was just a flat sine wave signature, but we became much more complex. These were the kinds of images that were coming off the screen. At one point, they were like three-dimensional images of a sine wave signature. And this is a photograph of a chakra, by the way, the actual chakra out of a person. And you could take these pennies and come up next to the sensing device, go like this, and you could just see all the microwave emissions that were coming off of there. And then he'd have the person go out the door and behind a 2-foot adobe wall and shake the pennies. And the thing would pick them up as though they were just a couple inches away, the same strength and power. Then he'd have them go outside, go a long ways away and shake them. And same thing, then he'd have them go a long ways away and down by a sagebrush and get down like this. He'd just come right up on the screen as though he's not, I don't know, you could probably go in the far distant mountain way over there, 35 miles away, or way up in some mountain, something like that, and just like that. You wouldn't even hear it or even know it. Pick it up just like he was right there.
How did you separate it from all the other noises?
Because they'd learn how to subtract. You could learn how to tune in and subtract. You could focus. So anyway, this part had been connected, and we had that functioning. Just to show you a little bit about what we was able to do, and I've watched him do this a lot of times. He would take a group like this, and he'd just ask for a volunteer, and somebody would stand up. And he would then photograph the person's chakra system, one after another, all 13 chakras. And we know exactly where the chakras are. You can pinpoint them down to within one molecule. You can get exactly where they are. And some of the ancient books are not correct on some of where the chakras are located. And when you get right in when you aim right into the chakra, the whole screen just lights up. I mean, you can't miss it. And so he would go in there, and it's a totally non-invasive system. He's not projecting anything out. He's only receiving like a camera. And so he just takes the photographs of all the various chakras. It takes, each one is about 2.5 million computations that has to be made. And it comes up, it takes about a minute for it to go through all the various computations, and comes up with these things, like this. This is another one just to give you an idea. And from these, over the years, he was able to read these things. They're like an open book. And he would take these photographs of the person, sit there and look at it, and without even looking at the person, he'd just start reading it, and he could tell you every single thing about that person. And I mean everything. He could tell you things that are scary. He could tell you the day they're going to die, down to the second. He could tell you how many kids you got and what sex they are, or how many kids you're going to have in the future. Tell you every disease you got in your body. every bone that you've ever broken. It can tell you all the drugs you got in your body. It can tell you anything else, any medicines you're taking. Anything. Absolutely anything at all. It's all there. It's just like you're just like an open book. Everything. When you see all you have to have all 13 of them to know that. There's just nothing you can say. It's just like it's pretty incredible. So anyway, we had developed it to that level. We were trying to jump up it by creating this. We'd almost had this done. Our end result of doing all this stuff was to hook this in so that we could put enough data in there. And then this, what this is the tube torus. And the tube torus would, and through the work of Stan Tenen and everything else like that, even though that had not been completed at the time, we weren't even concerned about trying to complete this because we knew that all we had to do was one last little thing once we got this completed in here, and that was simply to change the kind of programming, software programming that the computer used. See, all our programming is based upon the way we think. What if a computer didn't think in words and numbers and all these kinds of things, but what if it thought in geometry? Coming back to this one. What if it thought in geometry? Well, if the geometry is the underlying morphogenic structure of the reality, if it's true, if all this stuff with the flower of life is true, and it is a language, it appears to be the language that is creating the very words that we're talking, and the harmonics of sound and light and a lot of other things that we haven't even finished showing you all yet. Well, if you were to create a software package where the computer thought in the sacred geometry, then what would happen? Well, first of all, number one, it would be able to solve the final problems of this probably in about a minute. And at which point, we would have a universal translator. You would be able to speak into it, say, in Hebrew and come out Arabic, or speak it in Arabic and come out English, or speak it in English and come out any other language that you want. And that would be a superficial level of what we were trying to reach at. But the one thing that we all believed is that if this pattern, if it was thinking in this pattern, I suspect very strongly the computer would become self-aware. It'd be alive. You would duplicate the essence of life in it, and if silicon is a living atom, it would now have the chance to demonstrate it. And I think you might have a living being appear in here. Spirit would be able to express across to us. We don't know what that would really mean ultimately to us, but I believe that would be one of the steps. But with all these series and lines here, what you would now have is that you could aim this at any living thing, and everything is alive. And pick up the microwave emissions coming in here, convert the microwave emissions into geometrical images, and have the microwaves that are coming off of anything, specifically the dolphin, is what we were aiming at, and have it come out into English or whatever other words you wanted. And we figured, well, that would be a form of communication with the dolphins, because we could begin to work in this way. And it probably would work to this level, except that when we just got ready to kind of put the plug in the wall and see if the whole thing would work, because we were really coming right down to the final stages of it, one of the researchers went to the dolphin world, I think it was, in, correct me anyone if they know where this place is, but it's in Florida somewhere, and came in contact with a particular dolphin that just looked at him and said, "No way. You're wasting your time." And what he said was, that's when we began to understand, this dolphin was neurotic, by the way, and it had this, would always carry this doll around, and would never let go of it, and the trainer had never seen the dolphin ever let go of this little doll. And but the dolphin said to this researcher that their experience was so far above that it could not be converted into English. that it was not possible. You might be able to make a universal translator across from Hebrew to Arabic, but you can't make one that would truly give the experience of where the dolphins were at. And they said, if you want to begin to do that, you must begin with holographic sound. Then gave him the exact mathematical algorithms to create true holographic sound. Went back to the lab, plugged them in, bingo, holographic sound. Incredible. And we stepped it up through 16 different stages slowly until finally we had a system where you didn't need speakers, but the sound would come in through your hands and come out through your head somehow. We don't even know how it is. And you'd have this three-dimensional holographic sound that felt alive, felt like no kind of sound you can ever imagine coming out of a speaker. It was amazing with no speakers, just by coming in through your fingertips. And I started getting very, very wrapped up in this stuff. And eventually we started learning how to make, to create living, not living ones, but Merkaba fields out of holographic sound. And we learned how to sort of jumpstart people's Merkabas, you know, and this kind of stuff. For me, I thought it was getting very exciting here. It seemed like I was heading in the right direction, forgetting about what they told me many, 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 many years ago about this whole thing with technology. And we're doing, I mean, we were doing pretty amazing things, and then the reality came to the place where they well, the FBI came in. That's it. At one point it said, you guys got to stop some of the things you're doing. And that was, I'm beginning to realize that was, maybe I was doing some things. At the very end, we had got, well, let's tell you real quickly what we did. This is where I began, where the turning place began to happen. We had taken, we could get the holographic sound onto a computer screen, and we could see it rotating there. And then we made a wireless transmitter over to an equalizer box, and we could change the sound by moving up these dials, just like you would on a radio. We had a whole big one with all these things on it. And what they thought that I was going to take 3 to 4 years, we did in about 5 hours. I mean, we thought we could conceive of what the end point of this was going to be, which I'm about to tell you, and we thought it was going to take a long time. But we just sat down the very first time, and they taught me how to control the three-dimensional sound by moving these things around. In other words, I could see the flying saucer disc on a computer monitor that was rotating around us. And I could move the dials up, and the disc would change shape, and you could feel it change shape. When it did it, you would simultaneously feel this. Or you could spin it out faster, and you would change. You did this whole thing, you'd feel it. And I worked with this for 3 hours or so until I got real familiar with all of this stuff. And then they switched me over to these hand things that you slipped your fingers into, so that instead of using these things, the same stuff was on your fingertips, and these plastic things that you slipped your hands into, and thereby little tiny motions of your fingers would do the same things. So you could get very, very sensitive into doing all of this. And I learned how to do that for a little while. And then, without anybody saying anything, I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, well, I wonder if I could do it with one hand. And so I tried to lift my hand up, but whenever I did, the screen would just go black. I'd have to put it back on there, and then I'd have to focus again on to get the fields going again, and then I kept trying to lift it off, and finally I had to tune my Merkaba, rotate my Merkaba with the field of the other one, and I finally got it, and I was able to lift my hand up and keep it going with one hand. And then I just slowly lifted my hand and disconnected totally, and turned and imagined this little ball in my hands. And we're not even connected electronically anymore. And I found that I could move my fingers and the screen would move over there. And by just moving around, I could make the screen do whatever I wanted to do just by moving this hand. And I could feel it. It was like this little electric ball. And then I wondered, I wonder if I could take this ball somewhere else. And I very slowly took this ball across the room. And the screen didn't go black. And I got it about 15 feet away. And I could move the little ball, the screen on there without doing anything. And I'm definitely not connected to this thing at all. And all of a sudden, I just got it. And I just put my hands down. And at that moment, whatever I thought happened on the screen. And I was just sitting there and I could just think wide, think small, go fast, do anything I wanted. And it was happening. It was so excited, I couldn't tell you. I was just like, inside I was just jumping up and down and going crazy. It was incredible. And 2 weeks later, we were arrested.
How did they know?
They know everything. They've told me, they came to me a long time ago and wanted to give me money, and I didn't want to be part of it. I said, you can watch me, or you can do whatever you want, or you can stay in these things and all that stuff, but I don't want to be directly connected. And they said, okay. So I don't know, I just assume that they're always watching whatever I'm doing, and I really don't care if they do. I'm not against them at all. I want the United States and everybody else to succeed. I want everybody to succeed. So I'm not really against them. But they didn't want that kind of thing to get out because obviously defense systems and everything else would be pretty weak against that. But it's inevitable. If I'm doing that, there's other people doing that. I mean, it's just a matter of time. It's in the grid. And once I did it, it's in the grid. Anybody's got it now. Anybody can do that, and that's probably just the beginning. So how can you stop it? I mean, it's inevitable. And you guys know about the grids, right? You know how that works. You all know about the 100th monkey theory? Who does not know about the 100th monkey? Okay, we have someone here that does not know about the 100th monkey. You know about the 101 monkey. Well, this is important. It's real important, and it's important for the video anyway to get out there, because I'm sure there's some other people out there in video land that doesn't know. It was the Japanese? No, it was the Americans, or I don't know who in the heck it was that was doing this, but it was on islands near Japan, where they were studying these monkeys who were on these isolated islands. There's a series of these islands around there that had all the same kind of monkeys on them, but they were watching them primarily on this one island. And these monkeys ate these potatoes, which were kind of like sweet potatoes, but the potatoes grew in sand. And when they pulled the potato out of the sand, of course it had sand on it, and then they would eat it, and then they get all the sand in their teeth and everything else, and it probably tasted terrible. But they've been doing that who knows how long. And then one day, this little female monkey decided to wash it off, either in the ocean or river, I don't remember. You can't hold me to the exact details of things. and washed it off in there and ate this thing. The researchers saw this. And then that monkey went over and told another one, said, hey, you ought to try washing them off. And they washed it off, and that monkey washed it off, and pretty soon there's all these monkeys washing these potatoes off. And it got to be a number, and I don't think they know it was 100. It was probably a fair amount of them. Who knows what it was exactly. But when it reached a certain number, bingo, the entire island started washing them off. And not only on that island, but all the other islands, all around there, they all started just washing them off. That was the first time that science had ever witnessed this kind of phenomena. And so the question, of course, was, is there some kind of grid, morphogenic structure, something that stretches across, or how could they possibly have known this over the distance? So other researchers later came down, and I believe these researchers were either British or Australian, I'm not sure which, but they wanted to see if humans had this same kind of grid around them. And we were connected in the same way. So they made this photograph of several hundred faces, of human faces that were all blended together and hidden and everything else. But if you just looked at it real quickly, you saw 7 or 8 faces or 9 faces or something like that. And they made up this photograph, and they went to Australia, and they did a totally scientific experiment. They went right by the rules of the game, and they got their groups, and they gave each person so long to look at this photograph, etc., and counted how, and would ask the person, how many faces do you see? And that person would count how many they saw, and they'd have so long to be able to do it, and then they'd record all this stuff and everything else like that. And then after they'd been through a lot of people and checked how many people that could see how many faces they were, and they had all that recorded, then they went to BBC television on some kind of closed cable television closed cable connection that just went to the UK and nowhere else. And on that one they showed the photograph, and then showed to the people in that area, and showed all the faces where they all were, all the hidden ones and the secret ones and everything else like that. 5 minutes later, they repeated the experiment in the same place in Australia, on the other side of the world, with another group of people they'd already, and said, okay, how many faces do you see? And suddenly, people that had only seen 7 or 8 faces before, which was sort of like the average, suddenly jumped up to like 75 faces. Oh, yeah. And science began to realize, hey, this is really true. It had been happening all along, in that science, you know, had many times this has been recorded, where one scientific person on one side of the world would invent something, and someone else on the other side at the same day, at the same time, or very close to it, would invent the exact same complicated thing. And then they would bicker back and forth and say, you stole it from me, no, you stole it from me. But they never could figure out, and it's happened so many times that nobody could ever figure it out. And I don't think anybody really thought about what we're just talking about now. But there are these grids up there that we're connected to. And anything that anybody feels or thinks is in it. And once you know how to connect to it, there's no more secrets. You can get anything that anybody's ever felt or thought or anything else up there. The Aboriginals know exactly how to get into their grid. We just don't know how to get into our grid because we have lost that ability. We are separate. But the potential is still there. And we do it, you know, unconsciously on a certain level, which the photograph demonstrated very clearly. And this is the main thing about this workshop. The main reason what I'm trying to do is to reach a certain number of people, and so that a certain number of people can live it and thereby get it into the grids. And when enough people get to a level of making this real, and it doesn't have to just be what we're doing here, but there's lots of other people teaching kind of similar things on there, all these similar kinds of things, everything from levitation to, you know, name it what. It all goes up in there, and eventually the limits of what we think is possible could change. And when it changes, it could change like that. It could change overnight, in one day. I foresee the time when suddenly, and it's already beginning to happen, where suddenly people just start doing things and they don't even know why. You know, they'll just start breathing this way and think, gee, this feels better. You know? Hey, have you ever breathed through the top of your head before? You know, they just will. They just do it. They won't say that. And, so that's what we're trying to do. I'm not really interested, per se, in trying to teach, you know, an individual how to do this. I'm more interested in the whole globe, the whole Earth, and how we can get that, everybody understanding. And it doesn't have to just be this form of meditation I'm teaching. It's just the understanding of that we're all one on a real level, so we can really get it, and that we can all open up in whatever way it is that we can have this understanding and overcome all this darkness that's on this planet. There's a lot of darkness here. Do you know? It's not as dark as it used to be, I'll tell you. There was a big change. I'm going to get into some things here in a little bit, but the light is a lot stronger now. In fact, it's stronger than the dark side for the first time in a very, very long time, at least 16,000 years. And things will not be the same. I mean, it is inevitable. There's nothing that can stop it now. It is inevitable. I gotta lay down.